Inspector Brandt and Officer Ziegler were out on a routine night patrol through town. Both of them knew that these patrols were a waste of time. Nothing ever happened in their small town. The worst they'd ever ran into was a few drunk teenagers making a ruckus. This night was different. As the two of them drove down Main Street, they suddenly saw a figure standing in the middle of the street. It was a partly naked, long-haired young man. He looked scruffy, dirty, and covered in something dark. When the headlight of the car illuminated him entirely, it was clear in an instant that it must be dried blood. The moment the man noticed the police car, he started running. Brandt and Ziegler gave chase, and within a couple of minutes they'd caught the man. As Brandt handcuffed him, he demanded to know where the blood was from. It was evident that it couldn't be the man's own. There was way too much of it. At first, the man stayed quiet. The moment Brandt shoved him into the back of the police car, he gave a simple statement. "The girls," he murmured without any noticeable emotion. The inspector kept asking more questions as he drove back to the station, but the man stayed quiet. While Ziegler sat down to write a report, Brandt led the man to a cell and soon after decided to question him. The man was sitting on the bench in the cell when the inspector returned with a chair and sat down in front of him. Before Brandt could even say a word, the man asked him a single question. "Do you believe in dream eaters?" "The hell are you talking about? I'm not in the mood for any of this crazy shit." The man smiled a bit before he continued talking. "So, do you believe in them?" Brandt sighed. Got another crazy one, he thought. "What did you mean when you said the girls?" The man was quiet for a moment, as if to thinking about something. "They are evil spirits," he rambled on. "They enter your dreams, give you nightmares and make you do things while you are asleep. They are small, slimy things, got no arms, no legs, just tentacles. And one single eye, they use it to stare directly into your dreams and your soul." Brandt couldn't help but be creeped out by what the guy was saying. It took a special kind of crazy to come up with stuff like this. "What did you do to the girls? Is this their blood?" The man looked at Brandt with those empty, emotionless eyes. For a moment, his mind seemed to drift off to whatever crazy reality he was living in. Then he spoke again. "Is it theirs?" It was more a question than a statement. Brandt took a deep breath. This way, he'd get nowhere. "Okay, asshole." Brandt started and got up from his chair. "We found you covered in blood. We know it's not your own and you're mumbling about the girls. So how about you fess up?" The man lifted his head and looked at Brandt's face. "I myself didn't do anything. I did lots of shit, but I didn't kill them. No." Kill? Jesus, what had he stumbled upon here, Brandt thought. He left the city behind to get rid of those types of cases. And now dead? Fricking hell, he cursed to himself. "If you didn't do anything, why are you covered in blood?" At that moment, the man looked down at his own body and seemed to be puzzled. Then he looked up at Brandt again. "How about I tell you a little bit about myself, Mr. Inspector? I'm sure you'll understand what I mean afterward. Brand was about to yell at the guy again, but then he yielded and nodded. Might be the only way to get anything out of the guy, he thought, and sat down on his chair again. Well, as you can guess, I'm not from around here. No, I grew up in Eastern Germany. Our city was stricken by the reunion. My parents lost their jobs and we ended up in poverty. Life wasn't too bad though. We have been poor, but we were happy enough. All that changed during the burglary. Dad was stabbed and Mom, well, she got it worse. All the while I was hiding and saw everything. I'm not interested in your damned life story. Brand couldn't help but murmur. Right as he said this, the guy's head jerked forward. His eyes were wide open and he was staring straight at him. Brand couldn't help but inch back as far as his chair allowed. But this is important, Inspector, the man said with a penetrating voice. Crazy, Brand thought. This guy's a total nutcase. The way he spoke, the way he moved, everything about this guy was unnatural. It was almost as if he wasn't a real person, but an overdrawn caricature of a man. Make it quick then, Brand spat out. For a moment he thought he saw a grin wash over the man's face. They never found the guys, you know. Put me into an orphanage, but soon enough I ran off. I was driven out into the streets, you could say. At that moment, the guy paused and looked at Brand again. It felt to the inspector as if the guy was probing him for something. Then the guy shook his head and continued talking. The shit I saw, you have no idea. The streets can be a terrible place. Had to resort to quite a few fucked up things to get by. Worst was when I joined this one local group. That was a real shit fest. The things I was forced to do during that time. I really don't want to think back to it. If I wasn't insane after my parents were killed in front of me, I was after those years on the street, you know. So you're saying it wasn't you who killed the girls, but what your time on the street made of you? That it's society's fault? That all those things you had to go through turned you into a monster? Don't give me that shit, asshole. At this point, Brand started to laugh. This guy was too much. This story was so cliché there was no way it could be real. You still don't get it, do you, Inspector? What's there to get? Brand asked, now serious again. Well, whatever. Things got better though. Did my time, got into the social program, and soon enough I had a shitty job, a shitty place, and even met a girl. Can't say it was heaven, but life wasn't too bad. There was just one thing, the memories, and worst of all, the dreams. Every night I was back out there, doing the same thing again, hurting people. Guess that's what drove me to the bottle eventually. Huh, can't blame you for that one, Brand said with a chuckle. Needless to say, things with the girl didn't work out. I got drunk quite a lot and she didn't have any of it. Bitch ranted at me. I got angry. One night when I was out of it, I beat her half to death without even knowing. I left her after that, both for her and my own sake. At that, Brand looked up. For a moment, this part of the story hit a bit too close to home, and he thought back to his marriage with Sarah. As he looked up at the guy, he thought he noticed the hint of a smile yet again. "Cut the crap!" Brand yelled at him. "Enough with all the backstory shit. What did you do? Tell me." "Oh my, getting a bit antsy, Inspector? Did I say something you didn't like?" That was enough for Brand. He jumped off his chair and swung his fist right at the man's face. The man's head jerked back, and when he looked up at the inspector again, his nose was heavily bleeding. He didn't make a single sound. Instead, he turned and looked at Brand again, while the blood was dripping from his nose and running down his face. Brand slumped down in his chair again. Man, he thought, felt good to hit this bastard. "Clean yourself up," he finally said and threw a dirty rag at the guy. While the man pressed the rag against his nose, Brand kept questioning him. "What did you do?" "Well," the man started, "I think it's about time I told you. You know about the dreams, right? Can't sleep most nights. Today it was different. The dreams were different." "So, what did you dream about? Did you dream about those girls next door? That what it was?" The man burst out laughing, and for a moment Brand had to calm himself down to not hit him again. "How do you know, Inspector?" For a moment, Brand took the man serious until he saw his face. The moment he got up, the man rose his hands. Now, Inspector, I'm talking, alright? I stayed in a hostel. Real shitty place, real cheap, but after a few nights of hitchhiking and sleeping under the sky, a bed is a bed, you know. Fell asleep the moment I entered the room. Must have been early evening. In my dream, I wasn't on the street again. This time, it was about the night my parents died. There were no burglars, though. It was me and them, no one else. Brand said nothing. It was me who was holding the knife, and me who did everything. Couldn't do anything but watch every last bloody detail. I woke up screaming, but I wasn't in my room anymore. I stood in the middle of a bloodbath. There were 2 women on the floor, laying in their own blood, mutilated. I didn't understand what was going on, but then I saw the blood on my hands, on my body, and I felt something else. Was it remorse or was it shock? Brand asked with sarcasm. No, it was something on my shoulder. I was still stunned in shock, but when I looked over I saw it. It was nothing but tentacles and one huge giant eye that stared straight at me. I screamed and threw the thing aside. For a moment I stood there looking at it in disbelief. Then I remembered a story that an old homeless man had told me. There are evil spirits out there that influence your sleep and feed on your dreams. What was lying there was what the old man had described as a dream eater. I couldn't believe that something like this was existing. Soon enough, the thing was gone and it vanished into thin air. At that point, I heard a commotion outside, and before the door to the room burst open, I jumped out the window and ran. Brand shook his head in utter disbelief. Was this what he'd been waiting for all the time? That's why he'd listened to the ramblings of this man for almost half an hour? Demons? Evil spirits? The inspector looked at the guy in front of him and wasn't sure if he was truly insane or just plain stupid. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. Man, you must be a goddamn idiot if you think I'll believe something like that. Evil spirits, You've got to be fucking kidding me. The man shook his head and smiled once more. You still don't get it, do you, Inspector? Nothing to get here. Brent cursed and got up. The guy was out of his mind, Brent thought as he stepped towards the cell door. Not so fast, Inspector. There's one thing I've been burning to ask you. When Brent turned around, the man sat there, a big grin on his face, leaning forward in anticipation. You shivered when I talked about certain things. The one about the girl I beat up, and when I talked about murdering my parents. Why? Brent didn't say a thing. He couldn't. Did I hit a soft spot? I did, didn't I? Could it be you're like me? Could it be you bet your wife too? Did you kill someone as well? That's all true, isn't it? We are exactly the same, aren't we? With that, the guy burst into loud laughter. Brent stood there shivering. What the hell was going on? Was it your parents too? A relative maybe? Shut the hell up, Brent yelled. The man didn't react. Instead, he looked away, pretending to think hard. No, that's not it. You killed someone in the line of duty, right? Out in the streets? An innocent bystander, maybe? Now we're getting somewhere, aren't we? Was it fun to press the trigger? Did you enjoy it, Inspector? The man didn't get to finish a sentence because Brent hit the guy once again. How did this guy know all that? It had to be random guesses. It had to be. Admit it already. You enjoyed it, right? And then he kept laughing. Right at that moment, Brent made his mistake. He lost it and stormed forward, precisely as the man had wanted. He dodged Brent's attack and jumped him. Moments later, the inspector was out cold. It was an hour later that he came to. He was outside the station. There were firefighters and police all around him. When he came to, he heard what had happened. Ziegler had been shot, as had been Officer Meyer, who'd been sorting through papers in the archives. After that, someone had set fire to the station. Brent kept screaming at them and told them it must have been the bloody man, the one he'd questioned, but no one knew anything about that. He was out of it and had to be handcuffed and taken to the police headquarters in the city. It was there that he told Officer Schneider about the bloody man and what had happened at the station. It was the next day that Officer Schneider approached his colleague, Officer Kuhn. Listen, David, he said and handed him a recording of Brent's questioning. Once Kuhn had done so, Schneider talked to him again. What do you think about it, David? Well, you heard what Brent said, right? Yeah, but none of it adds up. What do you mean? It's obvious that the suspect, the bloody man, must have gotten a hold of his gun and… Well, that's what I thought too, Schneider cut him off. But that's the problem with this whole thing. What do you mean, Martin? Come on, talk to me. Schneider took a deep breath before he answered. There was no bloody man. What are you talking about? There's no proof of anyone like this existing. Nothing, nada. No one else saw the man. There are no fingerprints, no reports, no sign of anyone having been in the back of the police car. Yeah, but no, listen, that's not all. The thing about the girls the bloody man talked about, I looked into it right away. There are no reports of anything like that. Also, Brand's gun was found in the station. Only his fingerprints were on it. So you're telling me Brand's story is bullshit? You tell me, I've got no clue what's going on there. There's one more thing though. Brand's a drinker, a heavy one. Talked to his other colleagues and friends. All told me the same thing. Brand's never sober. Drinks at home, drinks on the job, and often falls asleep during work. So why not yesterday? Why was he suddenly sober and out with Ziegler? How was he able to catch and question that guy? That's all great, but what Right at that moment it hit Kuhn. You're saying Brand's responsible for this whole thing himself? You're saying he was the one that killed Ziegler and Meyer and set fire to the station? Schneider shrugged. As I said, no clue, just telling you the facts. All I know is that this whole thing doesn't add up, not at all. Kuhn had no clue what else to say. In the end, he told Schneider he still had some reports to finish and made his way back to his desk. Later that day, once he was done with all the paperwork, his thoughts drifted back to Brand's case. If Brand was the perpetrator, then why this convoluted story? He kept racking his brain for the next couple of minutes before opening up Brand's profile in the police database. There were quite a few things in there about the inspector. He joined the force more than 3 decades ago, right after he'd finished school. When Kuhn checked his family information, he found that his father had already been dead at the time. There was a notice that mentioned that a man had been killed by a burglar. For the longest time, Brand had worked in the city. A couple of years ago, he relocated to a small town where he ended up working with Officer Ziegler. As he read on, he found out more things about Brand. The man had a history of violence, and the file talked about him drinking on the job from time to time. There had been multiple charges of domestic violence against Brand. Worst of all, though, was an investigation of a killed teenager. As Kuhn opened the file, he read that there were rumors that Brand had it out for the boy. There were some who thought the inspector was involved in something shady. In the end, though, the investigation never came to anything and was closed. It was a couple of months later that the man relocated. Kuhn thought back to the recording of Brand's questioning. He played it once more and listened more carefully now. Why did Brand include all those details in his story? There was no reason for it. Why talk about domestic violence? And why bring up the teenager he'd shot? Why not say that the bloody man overpowered him and Ziegler? Then Kuhn came to the part about the evil spirit again. Those dream eaters that gave you bad dreams and controlled you while you were asleep. For a moment, Kuhn started to wonder. Schneider had said that Brand was a heavy drinker and often passed out at the office. What if? He felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up and quickly shook his head. There was no way. Finally, he got up, but before he went home, he decided to pay Brand a visit. The moment he arrived, the old inspector looked up at him. Before Kuhn could say anything, or even open the cell door, Brand asked him one single question. Do you believe in dream eaters?